session. My name is Stephen Kaufman, and I'm Schawk's Chief Technology Officer. And I wanted to welcome everybody to BrandSquare today for this session. We really are looking at a nexus between two emerging technologies. One is called the intelligent package, which I'll be explaining, and then the other that many of you may be familiar with, or at least somewhat familiar with, is the area of digital printing. So let's skip through a couple slides and get going. We've got about 20 minutes of talk, and then we'll have some time for question and answer at the end of that period. So, so the first question is, what do we really mean by the intelligent package? Is the package actually a person? We'd like to kind of talk about the vision of an intelligent package in the context of a package that's moving through production artwork. So if we look at the full stream of the life cycle, you know, you've got a lot of upfront ideation by design teams kind of building out what the package might look like in various iterations. But after that scope gets narrowed down, the funnel gets tightened, we get into a place where we begin to create our final artwork. Some would call it production artwork or final art prior to print. And at that stage, there's an awful lot of work and information that's placed on the package, be it a carton or a label if it's being produced in offset or flexography or even rotogravure. We're trying to get this information all packaged together and pushed to press. Usually time frames are pretty tight at the back end. So with an intelligent package, what we want is a package that helps the players in the supply chain, in particular the brand owners, to stay informed about the accuracy of the data in the package. And also we'd like to provide some flexibility in cases where you need to change data late in the production cycle, which can be a really big challenge for a single package and a very daunting challenge if we're talking about 20, 30, or 50 packages that are trying to go out for a large product launch. So, so on the next slide here, I've got kind of a funny logo of an apple with a nutrition facts ingredient panel. But these nutrition facts panels, they're regulated by the FDA in the United States. And there's actually quite a lot of rules and regulations around how one of these is built. Anything from the font size, character, the bar width on the bar separating the sections, etc. And often we're relying on the keen eye and expertise of people throughout the supply chain process to let us know if every single detail on that nutrition facts panel is accurate and ready to go. What we're talking about with an intelligent package is a technology that would surround the package graphic file. Typically in the packaging market, that's an Adobe Illustrator file. But we're looking at tools and processes that will surround that file and help us to be aware of mistakes or be confident when things are all correct. So in this example, if the package could warn us, let's say that there's a dual declaration, you've got the grams and really two measuring metrics there on that label, and perhaps in the market that this package is intended for, that's not the right declaration. It would be great if we caught this early on via an automated artwork check rather than late in the cycle, maybe through somebody working QA. So that's a single example. Another example, and really when the package can get to be more intelligent, is when the package has some self-awareness and understanding of what the different components of its construction are. So in this, I'm kind of zoomed back, but you've got a couple 2D carton dies laid out. And if I zoom in just a little bit, we'll see that each section of this carton die has annotation. So for example, we see it says the flap on this area does not show. It's a non-consumer readable area of the panel that will be hidden when it's folded and glued. And a smart die or an intelligent keyline, there's actually a lot of words, blueprint, die, keyline, but if the intelligence is there, we would have an understanding of which flaps show, which flaps don't show, which ones may be covered by glue, and then there are even pushbacks, areas where you don't want type too near to an edge. So if we had an intelligent package, we might get warning that if we put a type on that panel, that the type is on a hidden panel. These things seem relatively simple in and of themselves, but when you look at the fact that there are hundreds of different graphics and components on a complex packaging artwork file, catching every one of these in real time can be a daunting task late in the production cycle. Let's look at another one, a common one. This is a well-known logo to probably most of you. And every good, well-protected logo's got the circle R, the circle TM next to it. But if we have this appearing 5 or 6 times on a package, it's easy if we maybe drop off the circle R somewhere along the edit cycle. And the intelligent package could warn us, basically through a set of rules that the artwork is fed through, that there seems to be a logo without a corresponding registered trademark symbol next to it. And then if that trademark is there, maybe we have a report or a means to gather this data that confirms that the intellectual property of the brand is being protected. When we talk about recalls, I think most of us in the packaging field, food, beverage, drug, just the word recall kind of sets our hair on end. And this is some stats that I got from a site called www.good.is. But this really shows this year some statistics around recalls. And if you look at the stats there, you'll see that the ones that I've circled in red are related or could be related to the label itself. Undeclared ingredients are the most common by far. You can see, I think, 5 of the 6 that I've circled there come to undeclared ingredients. That can be a manufacturing issue in that the ingredient was put into the product without the knowledge of the people building the ingredient deck, or often it's just been left off. So, so you see of the recalls themselves, a lot are related to label content. And if you're in the design field, this is not typically an area most designers that I know really have a lot of passion and love for, is building the ingredient deck. Typically, designers and artists are more interested in catching the consumer's eye or building passion on the front of the panel, front of the package, and maybe not as interested or wanting to spend time gathering all the small details that come with the regulated copy that might be on a side panel or a rear panel. So part of the idea here that we're going to develop over the next few minutes is this idea of automation taking away the creative freedom that the artist has and as they try to build their brand for the consumer's use, or are we actually just taking away things that folks in the supply chain don't have interest and not adding value to the brand overall? I think for me that's more what it's about. We'll talk about that blend here in a moment. So a couple quick facts here. We just talked about the recalls being related to ingredients, but I think far more often we're just delayed late in the cycle because something's not quite right. And if the data that the pre-media supplier or the design supplier receives is incomplete or inaccurate, it typically results much more often in a delay and a scramble and a loss of calories at the back end of the production cycle than it does an actual recall, although the recalls are certainly the most visible and painful elements of that. So another thing that I think has hit most everybody in the consumer packaging field is the proliferation of different SKUs. So I've kind of put out some dimensionality here. So you've got some packages now with as many as 20 languages. You've got multiple sizes, flavors, different regulations and regulatory environments, different distribution channels, and many of these dimensions have direct impact on the consumer readable copy. And what we think we're seeing and will continue to see is just a continued expansion, almost an exponential growth in the number of SKUs that are divided along these different dimensions. Segmentation for demography or to selling to different markets is just one of the areas where we can see many more packages hitting the market. And so in view of that fact, how do we handle the complexity of all this data threading through and pumping through these packages and still make sure that everyone arrives right to shelf on time with the rest of the brand promotion? It's really a daunting challenge to any of you that have worked in the market very long. I think you'd agree that this can be very complex. So this kind of brings us to the meat. There's really 3 questions here about the intelligent package, and we'll go through those, and then we'll sort of end with a look at digital printing and how digital printing kind of blends with the intelligent package to try to bring a speed to and agility to the brand's marketing plan. So the first question here is the creation, delivery, review, and approval of art elements, copies, symbols, photography, and other packaging elements, is it really slowing you down? Because it's not always true that that is the bottleneck, although I think in my own experience, in the experience of Schawk and its brands, it often is. Getting accurate data from a variety of sources and blending it together can be daunting. If the answer to the first question is yes, the second question is, if this is so, is there a way to speed this process up that doesn't introduce more errors or introduce some other kind of risk that we're not hitting? And I believe that the answer to that B question is clearly yes, there are ways to speed these processes up. And then the third question is maybe the most difficult, a little bit gray, and that is, if that tool exists, is it practical and is it available now? And I want to work through just a couple of looks at that question. So let's move on now and look at that first question and a little more closely. And I would say that today we see most of this complex regulated copy coming in on a mixture of Excel documents, Word documents, emails, sometimes quick phone calls at the back end. So there's some chaos here that we believe we could thread out of the process by applying some of these different tools. I'll talk about the tools in a moment. One quick fact here, and this is really what it's about from a cost side, is with the intelligent package, and what I'm really talking about now is having this data instead of in all these different documents that are flowing back and forth between design, pre-media, and brand, to actually have a system of record, a database, if you will, that's either owned by the customer in their own IT stack or owned by one of the vendors in their supply chain, that becomes a central repository for the distribution of all this complex data, so that as the brand evolves, as decisions are made, as knowledge is needed late in the process, we can push this data dynamically onto the artwork instead of hand keying it and cutting it and pasting it. So in this particular consumer products company, they determined that they had about 3.7 million touches per year against their artwork, and that their studios had as many as 15 million touches. And that with the idea of the intelligent package, they were looking to reduce their own touches in their organization by half, as well as cutting their studio's touches. And touching it less doesn't mean having less impact or adding less value. I think, as I said earlier, really trying to talk about making sure that when a human, a valuable component in the supply chain or the CPG is looking at it, they're looking at something that has meaning to them and is meaning to the brand. It is not related to so-called busy work. So if there's cutting and pasting going on in the processing of your brand, if you're a brand owner, or in the processing of your customers' brands, if you're in the supply chain, there's a loss of auditability in that, and there's risk of cut and paste introducing errors into the artwork. The second question I believe we try to answer, that we do believe there are some tools, and Schawk does have tools for high efficient, low friction automation of copy, symbols, and graphics on the artwork. And Schawk's not the only provider. The ecosystem is growing in its ability to provide these tools. There are tools from other providers, both software vendors and pre-media suppliers in the market today. And then the last one, which we talked about, is it practical? And I think that's the key question for many that might be considering how they might look at some of these tools, and can they apply some of these tools to their brands. Really the key here is thinking about the ownership of the data. If the brand is willing to take on ownership of the accuracy of the data earlier in the cycle, and then push that data in their supply chain, they're going to be well suited to take advantage of some of this downstream speed. If they heavily rely on their supply chain and multiple rounds of quality assurance and QA to sort of weed out errors, then they're not going to be in as good a position as some of these other firms to take advantage of the changes and take advantage of the technology. So now we talked here before just about the package artwork itself. Let's quickly look at a couple other applications. So if you have this data in this system of record, where else can be applied? I think we're seeing a lot of brands need to push this data into e-commerce channels, Amazon, Walmart online, and other social and mobile application platforms such as Shop Advisor. I'll show you a screenshot in a minute. We need this data to be fluid and accurate and have a single source as it flows out, not only into the package itself, but into the e-commerce supply chain. So I have on my iPad a application called Shop Advisor. If you haven't seen it and you're in this industry, it's a very interesting application. It uses a geolocal tagging, so it knows essentially where the mobile user is, and then based on search criteria or what the user's looking for, shows you a graphic of the package and some detail about the package. But what we can see if we zoom in is that there's a huge variability in the quality of the graphics that I find across these mobile platforms. And I wouldn't put the blame at all on the brand owner. Often these engines are searching Google and looking for the first graphic that they can find that matches the brand. So the brand owners themselves are having some difficulty actually pushing out the correct graphic into the mobile space, even when they have access to it, because the environment's very young. We're working right now with a group out in California called Retailligence, and they're looking for a solid source for high-quality graphics and high-quality information to service the mobile market. And I think all of this goes back to that solid system of record data framework that can sit behind this information. What's it all for? Well, it's all about speed. You know, it's all about being able to have your brand react to the variety of challenges, regulatory changes, late cycle copy changes, and competitive pressures and requests from retailers that each brand faces in today's market. So now I'm going to segue for a minute quickly into the area of digital print, and we're going to kind of wrap it up with a couple of conclusions. Today's a little bit more of a smorgasbord of ideas than it is a deep technical study in any of these areas. But what I really thought about is I thought about the speed on the front end side, the creation of the graphic, is okay, if we've got the right artwork, how can we get it to market quicker? And in some cases, digital print is becoming the right answer, both in flexography and sheet-fed lithography, to move quicker when the opportunity presents itself. Why is digital printing relevant in mainstream packaging? Well, one is that these front ends, these things called DFEs, digital front ends, are becoming more and more advanced. They've been used in digital printing for years in catalog and publication printing, getting customized data down to the reader, specific to the reader in page material. We're finding areas now these DFEs can push high quality packaging artwork at high speed to digital presses. The HP Indigo, there's a new product by Lambda that's coming out. Many are entering this market. And what we're finding with this market, instead of being able to only capture some very short-run, niche front-end work, we're seeing longer and longer runs. I think you'll see this trend moving from 5,000, 10,000, up to 30,000, even beyond if the financial metrics work out. And we can talk about a little of those details here quickly. I think the key is that digital printing is evolving, and even the speed of the evolution has peaked. I was attending Drupa in Germany this spring, and really what you're seeing now is more substrates, inline coating, wider presses, higher linear speeds, and more complex finishing options, all coming together to service both the page market and the package market. And packaging is squarely on the table for this market, and we do think there are growing opportunities in this area. So let's think about, well, what are some of the opportunities? Well, I got this graphic. You know, I'm thinking of a team that wins a Super Bowl, a college or a pro team, where there's a high level of interest in Green Bay shortly after the Super Bowl for fans like this gentleman on the right who want to see his package with his hero Aaron Rodgers on it. But the market is not a national market, so we might be looking at a targeted run length. You might be looking at something where the unit cost in digital print is a little bit higher, but the opportunity for the brand is there, and so they might be willing to look at digital print to service a package that could target this audience in a time frame shortly after a game victory. Maybe another example here might be athletic event like a marathon that has a co-promotion maybe with a women's health care push or breast cancer sponsorship, where the financial metrics prior to digital print simply didn't work with the cost of printing and the run length. It didn't fit, and now brands are finding that they can make some targeted digital press runs and hit these markets with these new tools. So last slide on digital print is that there's a limited role if unit costs only are considered, but if we start thinking holistically about the digital print and looking at things like what was the waste if I ran a lower unit cost, a longer run, but I didn't use half of it, then actually my unit costs were double what I thought they were because I didn't use all the material. So we want to look at wasted product. What's the real cost of the brand of the production long length run, the 100,000 or million run, and what's the true unit cost of a shorter run. And then we want to look, of course, for sales that directly correlate to events and promotions where a special package could be involved. So finally, to wrap this up and open up for some questions, I believe that intelligent packaging and digital printing haven't formally met in the mass market. I think it's two technologies, the artwork prep, high accuracy and high speed, and then the ability in some cases with digital print to then take that finished artwork and move it through production, manufacturing it into the market, are just beginning to come together. I wouldn't say that anyone's missed the boat, although there has been some great case studies of some early adopters in these areas. If you're thinking about the intelligent package and with your group and your packaging, you really want to begin analyzing the different content of your package, the die lines, perhaps the ingredients, the symbols. Where's the least amount of organizational friction in gathering that data? Is there already a system of record that has some integration that you could move onto the artwork through your pre-media supplier? I want to look at opportunities, as we said with the e-commerce, to leverage this data across multiple channels. So if I spend the time getting this data all right, it might cost me IT time and process change time and really maybe some angst in my organization because I've got to change the way we work. I need to really leverage this further than simply the consumer readable content on the printed package. I'd like to find out how I can use this same data to push social platforms combined with mobile, point of sale, and other data. And then lastly, and maybe most importantly, is see if you can establish clear lines of ownership over the packaging content in this data. So if several departments all think they own a particular piece of regulated data, that's not good, and obviously if nobody thinks they own it, that might even be worse. So these are opportunities to kind of look at the way that your brand is rolling out and your departments are structured and begin moving in this direction. I presume that the designers, pre-media suppliers are ready, willing, and able to kind of help you go down this road. And again, this is not completely new. So I'm going to stop here, and I've got a ability to read some questions off, and we'll spend the last few minutes listening to some questions from the audience, and then we'll wrap it up. Jennifer, I'm ready when you want to send me a question or two. Okay, here's the first question. It says, the intelligent data seems like a good idea, but what would be needed on the part of the brand to implement this? What are some of the challenges? And I think we've talked about that a little bit. In fact, I just kind of wrapped up with that, but let me get a little more meat on that bone. So if we're actually pulling data from a brand about information, let's take something we're pretty familiar with. Let's say it's the ingredient deck. What we might be used to is sending the ingredient deck out during the design phase and then picking up that copy from the design when we produce final artwork. And there is always, I think it's fair to say, many checks that go against that. But that data, the longer the production cycle lasts, can begin to get a little bit stale. And if you think about the intelligent package, what it should be able to do is every step along the production cycle, at the back end of design, when production art picks it up, when we start to make maybe modifications to different flavors, we should be able to ask the package, hey, is your ingredient still right? And that package should, in essence, be able to reach back to that database and say, yeah, the ingredient deck is consistent right now with the way it was when I was designed. Or say, actually, there's been a change. This ingredient deck is different, and that might kick off a different process. But at the end of the day, if we're used to just calling the pre-media supplier, in some cases even the printer, and saying, I need a last-minute edit to the ingredient deck, even if we execute that properly, what we've done is lost the ability to move that correct data back to the source so that the next time we run that product, we make sure that the data is accurate. And in fact, some of the newer implementations of this workflow use XML to push the data from the customer down to the package. And then they do something called round tripping, where the final DAC gets compared back to the original DAC, and the brand owner can see if any changes were made. And hopefully, if there are changes, they were requested changes. But obviously, if they weren't requested, that would be that would have to kick off an immediate process, depending on how close to press you were. There's a question now I'm getting on intelligent dies, and the question is anyone using intelligent dies? And the answer to that is I actually don't have an example of a client using that. I know that one of the vendors makes a product called Artios CAD. Many of you might be familiar with, particularly strong in the packaging market. And in that CAD format, there's not a simple die line that gets converted into Illustrator, essentially a dumb line, but they're actually embedding what we call metadata into the die to give us information on how those panels should be used in the future so that we can do these quality checks. But I think that the die in particular and the intelligence of the die is evolving. I also think the ownership of the die, who owns the final copy of the die? Is it the converter? Is it the brand? Is it a supplier along the way? Whose IP is it? How does it get controlled? That's an area that we're really working on implementing in a more robust way. But I think the answer is I don't actually know of a truly intelligent die that's being used in the production workflow today. All right, the next question says, digital print has been around a really long time and has never lived up to the hype. What has changed and why should we care? Well, I agree, you know, digital printing has been around since the early 90s. I think the key here is some of the devices that we're seeing coming out in the market. I think what I mentioned earlier, that we're seeing much wider flexographic devices. The linear speed, I think some of the newer presses are moving upwards of 40 meters per minute, which, you know, is roughly a football field's length of material in a 2-minute time frame. So you can no longer read the material as it goes by in the digital press. You know, there's real speed there, both with the width and the linear speed. And then I also think many more substrates. We're able to, the ink formulations are, and the actual ink trapping on the substrates is becoming more controllable. Registration is near perfect on many devices. So all these things are coming together to create less of a niche market and a broader area where a brand on a certain substrate can really hope to find a digital press provider, digital print provider that can meet their needs. If you go into many press shops now, you'll start to see, even in traditional big iron press shops, you'll start to see the digital section, and I think the digital section is growing in these plants, and some plants are dedicated now 7x24 digital printing on flexo substrates, so certainly is a growing market. The last question, I think we'll be wrapping up at 12:30, so I'll take this last one, and I've got a question from Cincinnati, and the question is, will this presentation be archived for future review? And the answer to that is yes. We will be capturing it, and there will be a YouTube link, and we'll make sure that there's a link off BrandSquare for that link. I want to thank everybody today. We'll go ahead and wrap this up. It's a little hard with the video feed because I don't get a lot of visual feedback, but I hope this has at least sparked some interest and has been a good quick dive into copy management and an intelligent package, and then on the back part, the digital printing and how the two can bring speed to brand. Thanks very much.